this video, I'm going to give you an overview of how to use single-cycle waveforms inside of Serum, and how I've been using individual single-cycle waveforms to add up together to create really nice harmonically rich and complex bass wavetables. For those of you who might be new to single-cycle waveforms, let me quickly explain what they are. The easiest way to do that is to look at the wavetable editor inside of Serum here. We can quickly create a sine wave. The vertical axis is amplitude in decibels, and the horizontal axis is time. And as we move through the waveform as it begins, we have the compression, or positive phase of the waveform. We have the zero crossing here, and then we have the rarefaction, or negative phase of the waveform. And here we have the end of it, which is the wavelength. So one single cycle is from here to here, which is equal to the wavelength. And what Serum will do is loop this waveform and play it back faster for higher pitched audio and slower for lower pitched audio. The faster the looping speed, the higher the pitch. Now, we've already seen in my previous videos how you can use this visual wavetable editor to draw your own waveforms, and also how to import audio samples that contain quite a bit of information to be able to create full wavetables. But what I want to show you in this video is how to use little tiny snippets of audio, each one comprising a single cycle waveform, how to import those, and how to use those to create more complex sounding wavetables. So that begs the question, where do you get single cycle waveforms from? You can actually extract single cycle waveforms using a wave editor from any piece of audio, but I find that unnecessarily complex and time consuming, and oftentimes I get subpar results because you really need to calculate the exact number of samples, get it bang on, get your zero crossing points exact, and it's just too easy to mess that up in my opinion. So I'm going to show you guys an alternative approach where you can use really nice, high quality, properly done, pre-made single cycle waveforms. There's a sound design company called Galbanum that has created a pack of single cycle waveforms called Architecture. And these have been featured in a lot of the world's most prominent soft synths. You've definitely heard them before. And you can purchase these and use the individual single cycles independently and load them into Serum. So I've got their Architecture pack, and it's divided into a whole bunch of subfolders and a whole myriad of sounds. There's 25,000 single cycle waveforms in here in total. Let's check some of these out. Now inside of Live, it's looping that so we hear audio, but each one of these is actually extremely short. Now let's go ahead and add some into Serum. I'm going to start off with one of the folders here. We'll grab a fractal square. These ones have a nice solid fundamental in them. To add that into Serum, we simply drag and drop it down into one of the thumbnail frames. Now we can play that back inside of Serum. Let's go ahead and find a few more. We'll explore some of the other folders. Another one I like is Lo-Fi. Now, if you want to hear what one of these sounds like just playing its single cycle, we can go into raw mode here, which will fire it off as a one-shot. You can see how short these actually are. Okay, let's keep going. We're going to go down now into phase shift. We'll grab some of these. We'll put it back into looping. Those ones have a bit more rich harmonic content. And some of the ones I really like are down here in UHF complex. So now what we're left with is a nice collection of very different sounding waveforms. If we move the wavetable position knob, we'll move through them. But what we want to do here is create a nice smooth wavetable that we can morph through using automation or envelopes or LFOs. To do that, we're going to go up to the Morph menu, and we're going to select Morph Crossfade. And that's going to allow us to scan really nice and smoothly through the wavetable position. So you see we already have something that's sounding really nice and harmonically rich. There's a lot of different variation to the sound in there. And it's beginning to sound kind of like the Carbon wavetable inside of Massive. Before we move ahead, I'm going to use the menu to copy oscillator A to B, so we can come back to this in the future if we want to. We'll deactivate that for now. We're going to go back into the wavetable editor. I'm going to show you something that I've been doing that I've been getting really good results with. I'm going to undo that morph that we did. And instead of morphing each one of these, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add some additional content here. I'm going to select this waveform, click plus so we get another copy of it, and then I'm going to go single, insert silence. And I'm going to click plus a few more times just to create little frames of silence. Then what I'm going to do is every couple of frames, I'm going to drag in a frame of silence, like so. And after I'm done that, then we can go to Morph Crossfade again. And we're going to get a very different result this time as we move the wavetable position knob. Check this out. By having little gaps of silence in there, we get a kind of filter LFO effect, because what's really happening is as we move through the wavetable position, we're removing some of the harmonics as we get closer to silence. Now what I'm going to do is put a sub-oscillator underneath. So when this wavetable goes to silence, we still get a nice, clean, solid fundamental, but the harmonic content is removed. And that gives us a really nice wobbling effect when we add modulation. So let's get some LFOs working here. We'll take LFO 1 and map it to wavetable position. And we're only going to have it modulate it just a little bit because we have so much complex harmonic content in here that we don't need to morph through the whole thing. Let's just go and turn this into an envelope. And we'll have that trigger over a quarter note. We can move that wavetable position knob around now to find sweet spots. Let's take a second LFO though. We'll also map that to wavetable position. And again, have it just modulating it very slightly. And in this case, we're going to put the LFO here onto trigger, so it's going to re-trigger from the same spot every time we hit a MIDI note. And we're also going to put a delay on it so that the envelope of the first one is going to act, and then this LFO is going to kick in and do the wobble after the fact. We'll set it to be a quarter note, and there we go. Let's go ahead now and set up a few other things that I typically do with my bass patches. We're going to take the random phase parameter all the way down to 0. By default, it's all the way up, which means it's going to randomly select a different part of the phase to begin each note in. And for bass, I like it to hit really hard and consistently. We're also going to turn up a few unison voices, and we're going to back the detune off. Now let's go ahead and activate monophonic, legato, and we'll put a bit of portamento on it. Over in the mod matrix, we can select an envelope, envelope 2, and we're going to map that out to global tune, like so. And we're going to use that envelope very short like this, just to add a bit of thump to the front of that note. And by default, when you assign a pitch envelope to global tune, it shows as bipolar, so it's modulating up and down. We just want that in a single direction, and here we go. Great. Next, I want to set a pitch bend range, because I always like to have my bass patches be nicely playable from a MIDI controller. Here we go. And we can continue scrolling through the wavetable position to find other sweet spots. And you can hear there even the smallest movements to the wavetable position knob yields really sonically different results. So we have tons and tons of different textures we can scan through with a single wavetable. Another thing that can sound really good on this type of patch with a wobble in it is to take the LFO that's providing that wobble and take it off of BPM sync. So we're just working in a free rate here. We'll take that delay right down so it's kicking in a lot faster. And then we can use another modulator, for example, the incoming MIDI note, to key track it. So as we play a higher MIDI note, that wobble is going to happen faster and faster. We can take the rate down even a little further. We can add a little bit more of the range. And we can find a nice sweet spot with that. Yeah, I like it around there. Let's go ahead now and use a macro on the wavetable position because I really like the spot we found here. I think this sounds good. And I don't want to lose that sweet spot because the wavetable position is so sensitive to small movements. I'm going to take macro 1 here. I'm going to assign this to wavetable position, drag it down here, and then we have full control non-destructively over it. If we want to return to that sweet spot that we found, we can come all the way back to 0, but it also allows us to explore the sonic capabilities of it by moving the macro knob. So there's another nice little sweet spot right there. Let's go ahead now and process the sound with some effects. We'll start with the hyper. The hyper is fantastic for filling out a sound. We're going to put all of the unison voices on trigger. And then we'll give the dimension expander a little bit of mix. I'm going to bounce back over to the OSC area, and I want to add a little bit of drive with a filter. We'll go through here, and we'll find our filter, add a little bit of drive. We'll take the mix back a bit. I really like all the different areas inside of this synth where you can add things like drive. You can just add it in layers and layers. Let's go ahead and add an LFO, our third LFO here, to the cutoff. I think that'll sound nice, especially if we take it and set it to re-trigger, and we back off the timing. Great. Let's go back over to Effects. Let's add the distortion model in. Asymmetric is one of my favorite types. It'll change as you move the drive. You can see the pattern changing. Let's put that in the mix in parallel. Let's go ahead and back off that envelope a little bit on the front end. Great. Now let's add in a reverb. The reverb is pretty big in this synth, so I'm going to really back off the settings here. We're going to give it a fair bit of damping, darken it up. And then let's go ahead and add a final filter. We'll pick one of our types here. And we're going to use the filter to add a little bit more drive. We can even use that second LFO to add some modulation to the cutoff, to the drive amount of that filter. We could even use it to add a little bit more drive from our distortion and a little bit of mix from the distortion as well. So using a variety of very simple input sounds, just a few single cycle waveforms, we've wound up here with a fairly complex, fairly harmonically dense, nicely playable bass wavetable. Let's check it out in action.